Well, hello and welcome to Inside the Artist Studio. I'm Rose Frederick, and I am here with a dear friend of mine, Michael Vacchiano. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I am so excited to peer into your studio. You are a Denver artist and went to CU for your undergrad and graduate, I think, right?
Undergrad.
Undergrad at CU. And so you are, I'm so excited to finally, well, no, actually I've worked with you on another show. Have some of your work in this show coming up, Contemporary Realism, that is January at Gallery 1261. And this is kind of a show that it's near and dear to my heart because I think like I am such a champion of artists who are taking Western ideas and putting a spin on them. Because what you're doing then as a contemporary Western artist, one, we're out here saying, hey, quit flying over these states and saying nothing's going on down there. There's great art happening here, and there's art that isn't cowboys and Indians and wannabe Remingtons and Russells, right? Like we're actually living in the West, dealing with social issues that are happening here through art. And you are one of my favorite artists for doing that. I think you're just really fearless about it. But you also do this great thing with your work. And I can't wait to do a screen share with this because your work, when people see it, they're like, wow, that's beautiful. And then they get sucked into it and start asking questions, which is exactly what I want to do with you right now. So, are you ready?
Sure.
You're probably sitting there like, do I have an option? We're getting three pieces from you, and these are oil
Yeah.
on linen canvas.
Uh, Canvas and panel.
Okay.
My preferably panel.
Yeah.
Uh, just kind of circumstance that I had a canvas lying around, so I
Oh,
started working. But yeah,
hey, you know what? I'm going to do a screen share, but would you would you talk about that briefly because I think people like they don't fully understand why an artist would choose a board or a canvas board or just a canvas or linen or like would you talk about that a little bit?
sure. Mostly I paint on panel because, for one, I enjoy the reaction of the surface a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I all traditional techniques, oil grounds, sizing, um, and the panel actually uh, is a little more conducive to longevity of the piece. It doesn't expand or contract. So with
Mm.
oil, just adds to the archivability of it. And,
Uh-huh.
especially coming from Colorado, if it's going to a lower elevation, that can always be a problem with,
Mm.
um, the piece cracking over time. So
Yeah.
effort to basically make it as archival as possible.
Yeah.
And colors react a lot better. When you're working on an oil ground versus an absorbent ground, oil paint does a much different thing, and it's much more vibrant, and it kind of maintains its color a little better.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's why.
Wow. Okay. And then also too, um, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're painting on a flat, harder surface like an oil on a board versus a canvas, like the board doesn't give. The canvas like gives as you work on it a little bit. Does that change things for you?
Uh, yes and no, I can do both. But like I said, I prefer the solid surface.
Yeah.
That,
Nice.
as far as the final product, affect it very much, but
It doesn't really affect it. Um,
no.
Hey, I'm gonna pull up one of the paintings we're getting from you called Two Step.
Okay.
And this is kind of exactly what I was talking about with your work that I just so enjoy is that here you are throwing this bucking horse in sort of in this scene of these flowers or even wallpaper. I mean, it's just kind of a trip, like what's going on here? So tell us about Two Step.
So with these current pieces, I was kind of playing with these ideas of kind of a nostalgia for, what we traditionally think of as Western, but also adding kind of these contemporary twists.
Mhm.
Um, these pieces kind of play a little bit with the masculine versus feminine. Um, they're just kind of, I don't know, my take on um, that juxtaposition, those different concepts.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is there anything to the background that, like, how do these come to you? They almost look like they come to you in a dream state or something.
Yeah, a little bit. I just kind of, again, this reminds me of sort of like a 70s, kitchen wallpaper kind of thing. And, so again, it's kind of harking back to that kind of nostalgia for a way of life that um, kind of defines us as,
Mm.
Western, but it kind of gives it this ethereal quality where it kind of brings it into this modern context. And then again, there's certainly some social political commentary injected in there. I try not to dictate that to people. I would prefer for them to kind of read into it and get what they will out of it. Uh, you know, then we can have the conversation of where those two ideas kind of meet. Because often with my work, um, it's not the same. Or people aren't reading the same intent that I put into it, which is okay. That's perfectly okay. That's where the conversation starts.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm a firm believer in letting people kind of uh, get their own experience out of my work and then going from there.
It's fun to look at work, I think, that has those layered meanings to it, because certainly someone could look at this and say, "Oh, blue's my favorite color," you know, and be like, "I love this painting." And then another person could walk up to it and maybe start this conversation with you and just like kind of dive into more of the, you know, this kind of culture we have in the West that is sort of there's this law of the West and this there's a lot of good old boy kind of stuff going on and it actually excludes a lot of us from that conversation in a way um so you could look at a painting like this and just see how these two subjects they work together, but they're also competing with each other in a sense because they're both pretty like they're really in focus. They have about the same amount of real estate on the canvas and things like that. So it seems like there's a lot more going on this canvas than first maybe meets the eye.
Sure, sure. And there's certainly kind of a feeling of almost loss of control, the falling, you know, um, and again, I don't want to I don't want to interject too much into it, but it's yeah, there's certainly a lot of levels. And
Yeah.
it's funny you mentioned color because this actually went through quite a few iterations before I settled on where it's at.
Really?
Uh, yeah.
Oh, what did
Uh,
it go through? I'm always so curious.
um, Started with more of a deeper royal kind of blue.
Oh.
Um, which I was having some value issues with. Then it moved into kind of a teal, and then it moved into more of the cerulean. Um,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because something I just thought of while you were talking about that blue, the blue and the pink, um, certainly add to that kind of masculine feminine idea,
Mhm.
which I was kind of leaning that way subconsciously.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Wow. And I'm so glad to hear about the iterations of that blue, because the cerulean color does make it feel like everything's been like sort of tossed up against a sky, almost like,
mm-hmm.
those photos of like a parent who throws the kid in the air, and catches them, or it has that sense of, yeah, being just everything's tossed up and you don't know how it's going to land. Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. Is that like when you start a painting, do you have a thought, or do you just kind of start a painting and then it flows around into it?
Uh, Kind of both ways. Typically, I'll start with an image. I start to kind of
Mm,
build things in my head, and as I'm working on them, I certainly have a concept that I'm starting from, but it grows as I work on the piece and
yeah.
to evolve into kind of the narrative that it becomes.
Oh, I the last show that I had your work in, it's been a little while, but it was an ekphrastic show, and you responded in painting. We did this cool thing where the poet responded to the artist's work, and then the artist actually responded to the poetry, and you responded to some of a writing by your sister.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I just thought that was like everybody in the show and everybody who came to the show, I just heard such great things in that people love the challenge of responding to a poem, and the poet's the same, responding to art, and it became this kind of team thing. um but then also I think it helped people who walked through the show to grasp a little bit better, where does art come from? And sometimes it comes from literature or poetry. And I have a sense with your work, and I think this happens often with realism, is that maybe we're looking for what is the grounding, what is it responding to, or what evoked that work of art. And so I'm wondering now, here we are with this other piece that you have, urban
Camouflage.
German. Yeah, okay, good. I couldn't remember the name of it. Um, and this one, you were telling me before we went started recording this, that you have a studio mate who works on different kinds of things, and it sort of seeps into your work or influences you. Tell me about that a little bit.
So Brett Matarazzo and myself were co-directors of a nonprofit bridge project,
Mm-hmm.
and we share a studio in the space. And we often collaborate on work. Um, but yeah, he does. All of his work is reclaimed wood,
Mm.
uh, and it's all about conservationism. So when I was working on my Western series, um, I did a couple of pieces in this vein. They were kind of exploring these ideas of encroachment,
Mm.
uh, or kind of traditional sense of trophy and hunting.
Oh.
Um, I kind of love this idea of the contemporary deer head on the wall
Mm.
that wasn't necessarily a trophy. It was kind of more of an homage. Um, but also, at the same time, it has this kind of sense of, I don't know if it's loss or um, confusion with the graffiti in the background.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
Well, and
again.
certainly, I mean, I remember when we were first talking about your work, and this is years ago. And when I meet an artist and we're talking about work before I've seen it, I'm always like, well, I'm curious. Um, but you never know, right? I mean, there are just so many different things out there, and people who are in different places with their career. And I remember when I saw your work, just being so blown away by how you were painting these representational pieces. Because certainly in my side of the curation world out here in the Western United States, there are a lot of people who paint wildlife from photographs, and kind of has that photograph feel, like it's removed from your distance from it. But in your work, you're not distanced from it. And I have a sense that it's a lot about who you are as a person, but also really your ability to paint, and what you're trying to do with this, that is just, it's just above a lot of work that's out there. And I think this is another one of those pieces that, to me, this deer just feels really alive and in motion through that scene. Whereas I see a lot of wildlife paintings where they feel like they're painted from the trophy, they're dead. Um, yeah. And I think the graffiti in the background also, and your color choice of that yellowy greeny color, if I'm seeing it right on my screen, it just vibrates, you know?
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just amazing. And so obviously I'm going to walk into this painting, and this is a larger painting. It's what, 40 inches by about 30.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm going to walk into this painting and see this deer moving through this graffiti, and have probably even more questions about this one.
Okay.
So you are also, are you still involved with there's the paint the walls in Rhino? Are you doing that? Isn't that the big graffiti?
No, that was. I think you're thinking of. I can't remember the name of it. I know what you're talking about though, but I'm not a part of that. No.
No. Um, yeah, I just wondered if there was any crossover with
Oh, Crush.
this.
You're thinking of
What was it again?
Crush.
Crush, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, just kind of thinking on like the juxtaposition of putting wildlife in front of graffiti.
Yeah. I should look into it. I've never done it.
You haven't done Crush? I thought you did for some reason.
No, I don't typically do a lot of mural work.
Mm,
I kind of prefer the small scale.
yeah, more studio. So these pieces that we've been looking at, and then there's a third one over your shoulder that we're getting, that just you're still working on a little bit, I think you said.
Yeah. A
Um,
few little details, just wrapping it up probably this week.
yeah. Um, So these are also just, I guess, one final question. Speaking of wrapping it up, I need to let you go. But you've been working on a series of pieces, and I know I've seen a number of them, of your work, and I see the stars in the background in a bigger piece. But you've been working on this series, and I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about the series and the origin of it, and maybe where it's going next.
Uh, sure. That's like I said, it's kind of a contemporized Western aesthetic. It's American folklore.
Mm.
Um, a lot of it has a lot of social political commentary interjected.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the interesting thing about it is, when I talk to people, depending on their political persuasion, they see it
Hmm.
differently than I do.
Oh.
Which I guess when I first started doing that, it kind of bothered me because there's a message to a lot of the work. However, at the same time, art is a kind of place for coming together and starting a conversation. So I won't say that. I mean, I've definitely gotten arguments with people over some of the pieces, but
You?
uh, so um, yeah. And I guess where it came from is that I've always kind of done work in the Western world, whether it's in art or some of the other things I was doing, and I always took inspiration from the aesthetics. But for me, I just wanted to take it a little bit further and explore some of those
Mm-hmm.
concepts. How does this relate to our world today? So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I started with that, and yeah, really sure where it'll end up, but
Yeah. You know, um I just thought of one last thing I want to ask you. You and I talked about this one time about labels and being labeled a Western artist. And I think when you're on the more contemporary edge, it's also like being labeled a Black artist or an Asian artist, or, it's like, but art is art. Um, and I'm wondering how you feel about that, about an artist who's been here. Like, you've been in Colorado. Were you born and raised here? Or you?
no, no,
Yeah.
I moved in '96.
Okay. So for college or right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I mean, what do you think about that, being a Western artist?
I mean, to be honest, I kind of go where inspiration takes me. I don't necessarily always paint Western.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm a Western artist in the context that I live in the West and I take influence from that
Mm-hmm.
world. But that's such an evolving concept these days that it's kind of hard to I don't know
Mm-hmm.
and hold that to one thing. So I don't know. It's just kind of currently where I'm at,
Yeah.
I
It
guess.
seems like, well, I don't know, personally, on the curation side of it, I love to see it be a contemporary medium, that I think people often say, well, I'm not a Western artist because I don't paint that. And it's like, well, I feel like that's a shame to say, well, I'm not that, or I even have collectors say, well, I don't like Western art.
Right.
But I do like this, and it's like, what do you do with that label, I guess? And
Yeah.
my hope is to make it a contemporary thing, a living thing.
Yeah. It's almost like it's a creating a folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all the paintings are kind of this allegory that kind of comes together, and you know,
Yeah.
I'm not sure where to go next, but
Yeah.
right now, story.
I like
So
that idea. I like that. Hey, Mike, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And
yeah,
yeah, get back to work, finish that painting so I can have it.
right.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you. The show will be in January, for the month of January, at Gallery 1261. And you can see more of Mike's work on our website, theartsoul.com, and on gallery1261.com. And come on down to the opening and you'll get to meet Mike and others. Good to see you.
You too.
Take good care. Happy holidays.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.